On November 9th, Mercury will station retrograde, which will be taking place at 6 degrees of Sagittarius, and it will conjoin once again Mars, notably very close to a contra-antiscia with Jupiter in Cancer. I think it's relevant, especially because Mercury and Jupiter are both stationed, moving very slowly in the sky at this particular moment. So they have a lot of time to have conversations through that weird little portal of the sky, and more specifically because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. And so I think part of what that's describing is pertaining to this kind of walk back that Mercury is having to do, where it's maybe receiving some new facts, maybe realizing that we jumped to some conclusions about some things, or we maybe made some impulsive decisions based on false assumptions, or perhaps we wanted things to be a certain way. We didn't want to believe certain things were true because they weren't aligned with our agenda, but we're maybe finding that there's a more nuanced set of data points that we need to review, and that may be humbling for some of us, and that may involve revisiting some arguments or hashing things out again during this conjunction between Mars and Mercury, which will be taking place on November 12th. Now, because of the way that this actually ties into the US Sibley Chart, I'm rather interested to see how this might play out, what this might bring up when it comes to the government or leadership within the government, because in the US Sibley Chart, Mercury is retrograde and placed at 24 degrees of Cancer, very close to where Jupiter is stationing retrograde. And in fact, Mercury will be stationing retrograde much more closely to that point of contra-antiscia with the Sibley Chart Mercury, as well as that Mars-Mercury conjunction. And Mercury in the US Sibley Chart rules the 10th house, so it carries the significations of the leadership of the nation. And I would say that while I don't know who specifically within the government would be benefiting, in theory, Jupiter is attempting to moderate or stabilize that situation in some way and potentially consolidate gains. But I would think that with the Mercury-Mars conjunction and Mercury stationing there, tying into it, I think this looks a bit like a move by some part of the government or the other to bring the other side more into alignment with it. Again, I don't know who's who in this relationship. While I think you can identify divisions within the government along party lines, I think you can also identify divisions between the executive branch and pretty much everything else. And whether or not that's an attempt to rein in the executive branch of the government, or whether this is a move by the executive to bring the rest of the government more into alignment with its agenda, I'm not sure, but I'm certainly interested to see what occurs, because it does look like some kind of controversy or conflict that forms along ideological lines, but we'll just have to see. I would really be surprised if this doesn't pertain to the government shutdown in some way, because the day after Mercury stations retrograde, Jupiter on November 10th will station retrograde at 25 Cancer, but we'll just have to see. With that, let's move on to the Sun in Scorpio applying to a trine with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces on November 16th, very much activating this grand trine, which we have been discussing as an ongoing theme of really the end of October into early December. And I think what the Sun specifically introduces to this ongoing dialogue or conversation between the water signs is with the passing of an old way of doing things. We are perhaps being invited or pulled to reflect on how we see ourselves, or how we've developed our idea of ourselves based on how we operate within the world as it has functioned and existed over the last decade to 20 years or so, and how maybe now that we're seeing some of that go away, or that we're starting to part ways with some of these old ideas, or how we've built our identities amid that now passing zeitgeist. What are some ideas about ourselves that maybe we need to let go? Maybe they never really fit to begin with. And ideally, perhaps getting to the heart of what is self, unattached from those external constructs. because part of what the sun describes is the internal sense of being a self and the idea that we develop about who we are. But a lot of that inevitably develops and evolves around this sort of dialogue with what the world tells us, how the world responds to our selfness and the will that we project out into the world, whether we're successful, whether we're not, how we're received, how things bend to us and how things resist. And perhaps this represents an opportunity for us to redefine ourselves amidst, new circumstances. But we maybe first have to let go of this older version or these older ideas about who we are in the world. And for some of us, there may be a sense of maybe emptiness. Who am I now that this isn't going to be around anymore? Or if my 18-year-old child is graduating high school this year, moving on to college, who am I now that the role which I have identified with is changing? And so really, I think this is about recognizing the opportunity available to us now that there's perhaps an unformed potential about what we can do, who we can be, the opportunity to be somebody else under a different set of expectations or within a different role. And maybe even if we were disappointed with some of the things that we realized about our capacity, we may also become being aware that without some of this dead weight or some of these old ideas, that in pursuit of a different goal or within the context of a different role, you may be more well-suited to rise to the particular occasions which are yet to emerge. So yeah, with that, we'll move on to the final notable astrological event of this period, which is Mercury's ingress back into Scorpio on November 18th, possibly 19th, depending on where you're located. But Mercury will be forming an opposition with Uranus immediately on this regress and will ultimately participate in this new moon in Scorpio, which I'm going to save more in-depth discussion of for the new moon in Scorpio video. But suffice to say, I think this represents the necessity to investigate or really peel back the layers, the motives and intentions that were behind maybe some of the decisions that were made earlier in the month, some of the arguments that were had, some of the conclusions that we came to. And I think there's a potential for some stunning revelations to take place that are not necessarily going to be acted on or going to be outwardly visible quite yet, as Mercury's deeply combust at this point. And while it is nearing the Cazimi point, this opposition with Uranus is occurring at the most burnt up point in Mercury's journey under the beams of the sun. So some of us may be discovering deeper underlying factors which are potentially game-changing or really change how we see a particular situation in a way that may take time to assimilate, be something so shocking or so unexpected that has potential to have a very strong impact on what happens going forward, that we maybe want to be very careful or continue to take some time to consider how that data gets leaked or how we present that information and potentially account for or mitigate the impact that sharing this new information or releasing it to the public might have, or releasing it to people in our lives. I do have some ideas about what this could indicate. It would kind of make sense if this had something to do, tying it back into the Sibley Chart and the retrograde station being tied into the Sibley Chart and the leadership of the United States. If this didn't have something to do with the Epstein case, perhaps some new data or information that could be shocking to some or could be devastating to somebody's case in some way. And so there may be an attempt to manage or control how these shocking revelations are portrayed or depicted or used. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about this right now. We're obviously going to discuss this more in depth during the new moon in Scorpio video. But with that, I'll call it a day. If you are interested in booking a reading with me, you can do so at KylePierceAstrologer.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now. Hey gang, wanted to take a quick break to tell you a little about the 2026 Magic Dates Electional Astrology Guide, written by astrologer and friend of the channel, Joe G, and myself, in collaboration with Astrology Hub. The guide includes 24 of the most auspicious dates of 2026 with full write-ups, rigorously handpicked by Joji and myself, which you can use to time those big events which you want to go as smoothly as possible, like launching a business, planning a date, or founding a cult. It also includes timeframes for the most powerful transits of the year, so you can coordinate your endeavors and make sure that the astrological winds are at your back. And what's actually really cool is that purchasing the guide also gives you the option of syncing this guide with your calendar, so you can easily plan your activities around what the astrology most readily supports. So if you want to get access to high quality and aptly named elections such as the Revelry, the Hail Mary, or my personal favorite, the Golzuka, you can pick up a copy and support the channel at the same time by heading over to www.astrologyhub.com/magickyle. That's www.astrology.com/magickyle. There will be a link in the description as well. I really hope you check it out. Joji and I really poured our hearts into picking these dates and doing the write-ups, and had a lot of fun while we were at it. So I'm actually really proud of our work. So yeah, go check it out.